The Price of Family, A Tale of Revenge and Redemption. It was supposed to be an ordinary Tuesday evening, a family dinner, the kind we had a dozen times before. But something was off. I could feel it in the air, heavy and unspoken, like a storm on the horizon that hadn't yet broken. I was sitting at the dinner table, absent-mindedly pushing mashed potatoes around my plate, my mind miles away. There was a big project at work I had to wrap up, numbers and projections swirling in my thoughts. But my mother, Sarah, was in her element, fussing over my sister, Emily's kids, doting on them like only she could. And my father, Thomas, he was being Thomas, quiet, proud, but distant. He'd always been distant. "Mom, I've been meaning to talk to you about the house," Emily said casually, as if the words didn't carry the weight of an entire life being altered in an instant. My fork hovered midair. The house. The one I grew up in. The one I'd spent summers with my father restoring, sweat, blood, and memories embedded in its walls. "What about it?" I asked, trying to mask the knot tightening in my stomach. Emily looked at me, her eyes sparkling with that all-too-familiar enthusiasm. "I'm buying it," she said, her voice light, matter-of-fact. "It's perfect for me and the kids. Mom and Dad are downsizing anyway, and, well, you know how it is." I froze. The room went silent but for the soft clinking of silverware against plates. I blinked as if I hadn't heard her correctly. But Emily was smiling, a soft, innocent smile, the kind that's usually reserved for the end of a good story. My mother, of course, was already all over it. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful," Sarah said, her voice dripping with approval as she reached across the table to squeeze Emily's hand. "It'll be so good to have you and the kids in the old place. It's perfect, really." I felt the blood drain from my face. My childhood home, the place I'd spent years helping my father rebuild, was being handed off like some piece of furniture no one could be bothered with. I hadn't even been given a chance to speak. I glanced at my father. His eyes met mine briefly before he quickly looked away, that familiar, uncomfortable mix of guilt and defiance on his face. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words caught in my throat. "How much?" I finally asked, barely above a whisper. My mother didn't meet my gaze. The silence that followed felt suffocating. 200,000, Emily said, her voice almost too quiet. "It's a family discount, of course. We talked about it for a while. 200,000. The house, my house, worth almost 4 times that in the current market." The weight of those words landed on me like a punch to the gut. I could feel the room spin around me. I fought to keep my voice steady, my emotions in check. I looked around the table. "Nobody thought to tell me about this?" I asked, the hurt creeping into my voice despite my best efforts to contain it. My mother shifted uncomfortably, her eyes avoiding mine. My father's jaw clenched, but he didn't say anything. "Well, Leo," Thomas began, his tone shifting into something that always made my skin crawl, a lecture, an explanation that was supposed to justify everything. "Emily has a family to think about. She needs the space. She's carrying on the family tradition." The weight of his words hit me hard. I wasn't family-oriented. That's what he was saying. I wasn't married, I didn't have kids. I had made different choices that didn't involve settling down, popping out babies, and hosting endless family dinners. I'd focused on building my career, creating something for myself, something stable, something that would ensure I'd never have to ask for help. But apparently that wasn't enough. "You're focused on different things," he finished, his voice lower now, almost apologetic. "Different things? My career. My investments. My life." The way he said it, I could feel the weight of the judgment, even if it wasn't explicit. I wasn't family. I wasn't like Emily. And somehow that meant I didn't deserve the house. I stood up slowly, my dinner untouched. "Thanks for dinner, Mom," I said, forcing a smile as I turned toward the door. "I should get going. Early meeting tomorrow." "Leo, don't be like this," Emily called after me, her voice laced with an edge of annoyance that I hadn't expected. "It's just business, family business." I paused in the doorway, turning to face them all one last time. My father's stubborn expression, my mother's guilty silence, Emily's smug concern, and her kids who had no idea what was happening around them. My fists clenched. "You're right, Emily," I said quietly. "It is family business. And you've made it very clear where I stand in this family." And with that I left. I drove home that night in silence, the hum of the engine the only sound in my car. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, my mind racing. The weight of the evening's conversation settled heavily on me. It was more than just the house. It was everything that had been left unsaid, everything that had been ignored. Emily with her perfect family, her perfect life. And then there was me, always the outsider, the one who chose a different path. The one who was too busy working, too focused on building something for myself to be family-oriented. I couldn't help but think of the house I'd poured my heart and soul into, the one I helped my father restore piece by piece. And now it was being given away to Emily for far less than it was worth, just because she had kids and I didn't. Just because she fit the role they had decided was worthy. The injustice of it gnawed at me. But as much as it stung, I knew something they didn't. I had the power to change this. As I pulled into my apartment complex, my mind shifted gears. I was a financial consultant. I knew how the markets worked. I knew how to read between the lines. And if Emily was buying that house for a fraction of its value, I was pretty sure she didn't have the cash to back it up. She was living beyond her means, just like she always had. I was good with numbers, too good. And it didn't take long for me to start connecting the dots. I opened my laptop as soon as I got inside. A few clicks, a few searches, and there it was. Emily had taken out a second mortgage on the house. I wasn't surprised. She had never been good with money. Every year, she'd rack up more debt, live paycheck to paycheck, and somehow still manage to buy the latest gadgets or take extravagant vacations. Now she was in deep. The house, the very thing she was counting on to provide stability, was turning into her financial anchor. And the weight of that was going to sink her sooner or later. I didn't act on it immediately. No, I wasn't the type to rush into things, especially not when the stakes were this high. Instead, I bided my time. I watched, I listened, I waited. It wasn't just the house anymore. It was the principle, the unfairness of it all. They had chosen Emily, not because she deserved it, but because she fit the mold of what a family should be. Meanwhile, I'd been the one to quietly support them all these years, helping with home repairs, paying off medical bills, offering advice when they needed it. But none of that mattered. What mattered was that Emily had the kids, the perfect little family, and she was the one who got the house. The more I thought about it, the more I realized something. This wasn't about anger. It wasn't about petty revenge. It was about justice. It was about giving everything a fair shot. Emily had been handed an opportunity she didn't deserve, and I was the one who would make sure that justice was served. But this wasn't going to be quick. It wasn't going to be obvious. No, I had to wait. I had to play the long game. Before I share what happened next, the moment that shifted everything and set the stage for the ultimate reckoning, I want to connect with you, my amazing viewers. Where are you watching from? Drop your country's flag in the comments below. And if you've ever had to fight for something you believe in, hit that like button, because this story is just getting started. I knew what I had to do next. I just had to wait for the perfect moment to strike. 2 years had passed since that dinner. 2 long years of keeping my distance, watching from the sidelines as Emily's life slowly began to unravel. It wasn't the loud crashes or the dramatic moments that marked her decline. No, it was the quiet, subtle cracks that appeared over time. Cracks that, if you didn't pay close attention, could easily be missed. I watched as she poured more money into the house. New countertops, fresh paint, renovations that would never truly add value. It was all a show. She was trying to create a facade of stability, a perfect family life that, in reality, was falling apart at the seams. Meanwhile, her husband, Michael, started showing up late to family gatherings, smelling of alcohol, his eyes glassy. Whispers of gambling debts and missed mortgage payments began to swirl around them, but no one said anything out loud. From my position, I could see it all clearly. Emily was digging herself deeper into a hole, but she couldn't, or wouldn't, see it. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I had learned the power of silence. My success in business, my careful financial management, my quiet observance, they all made me the person who had everything under control. Meanwhile, Emily, who had everything handed to her, was sinking. It would have been easy to step in, to point out her mistakes, to offer unsolicited advice. But I wasn't going to. Not yet. I had something bigger in mind. Every time our parents came over to my apartment, I saw it in their eyes. Flickers of regret, the weight of their decisions pressing down on them. They had handed her the house. They had chosen her. They couldn't come right out and admit they were wrong, but I could see it in their faces. I played the role of the dutiful son, maintaining my distance while silently watching Emily's life fall apart. I wasn't moved by pity. I wasn't concerned for her. I was only concerned with what came next. Then came the day I had been waiting for. Emily's financial house of cards finally collapsed. The bank, having given her more than enough time, began proceedings to foreclose on the property. It was only a matter of time now. I had been patient, calculated, watching her every move. And when the time came, I was ready. I already had the resources, the wealth I had built in the years since that fateful dinner. The pieces had all fallen into place. I contacted the bank, offering them a fair price market value for the house. They accepted. The house was mine. I couldn't help but smile to myself. It wasn't just about getting the house back. It was about proving a point. Emily had thought she could live beyond her means without consequence, that the world would just hand her everything she wanted. But this was business, not charity. This was justice, plain and simple. Now, the real game was about to begin. I had what was mine. The next step was to confront her. And when I did, it would be on my terms. The tension had been building for so long, so quietly, and now it was coming to a head. The calm before the storm was over. The moment I had been waiting for was finally here. I arranged to meet Emily at a coffee shop, the kind of neutral ground where no one could raise their voice too high or make a scene. She showed up early, her designer handbag looking worn at the edges, her once polished appearance now a far cry from the confident, family-oriented woman she used to be. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, her makeup half-faded, as if even the effort to look put together was beyond her now. She slid into the seat across from me, looking tired, defeated. "Leo," she began, her voice shaky, "I need your help." She looked at me with those pleading eyes that had once shown such certainty, such self-assurance. Now all I saw was desperation. "I'm falling behind on the payments," she confessed, her words tumbling out in a breathless rush. "Jackson's debts, the renovations, everything's falling apart. I can't keep up. Please, I need more time. Can you help me?" I looked at her, my face neutral, my expression calm. I didn't let her see any emotion, no sympathy, no guilt. She wasn't getting my help. She never would. "Help?" I said, letting the word linger in the air. "I've already done something for you, Emily." I slid a folder across the table. Her eyes narrowed as she opened it, the color draining from her face when she saw the eviction papers. "I bought the house," I said quietly, my voice steady, unyielding. "It's mine now. You're being evicted." For a long moment, she couldn't speak. Her hands trembled as she read the papers, and I watched as the realization sank in. Her world, the life she'd built on lies and overspending, crumbled around her. She blinked, trying to find her voice. "No," she whispered, her lips trembling. "You can't. This isn't fair. You can't just." I interrupted her, my voice still calm, cutting through her panic. "It was never your house to begin with. It wasn't your family's decision to make, and it wasn't mine, either. It was just business." The words landed like a heavy blow, each syllable carving a space between us. She didn't deserve the house, didn't deserve the life she'd been handed. She had made her choices that led her here, to this moment, and now there was no turning back. Her pleas fell on deaf ears. She begged, she cried, but I stood firm, unmoved by her desperation. This wasn't about emotions. It wasn't about family ties. It was about fairness. It was about restoring what had been taken, about giving the house back to the person who deserved it most. I didn't feel a rush of triumph. I didn't feel the satisfaction that might have come with the final act of revenge. What I felt, instead, was a deep, unsettling calm. I had played the long game, and now the victory was mine. Weeks passed, and I set about restoring the house to its original charm. The granite countertops were replaced with the butcher block I had installed with my father all those years ago. The modern light fixtures that Emily had put up were taken down, replaced by the classic ones that once graced the kitchen. I even brought in a team to restore the rose garden my father had painstakingly cultivated. The garden that Emily had destroyed in her attempts to modernize the house. When I invited my parents over, they came hesitantly, unsure of how to react. They'd seen the house in its new form, the house that had been torn apart by Emily, and now it stood as a symbol of what had been lost. When they stepped inside, Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the roses in bloom once again. "Oh, Leo," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It's beautiful. It feels like home again." Thomas, too, stood in the kitchen, running his hand over the butcher block, his eyes distant. "We should have offered it to both of you," he admitted finally, his voice tinged with regret. "We should have been fair." I met his gaze, the weight of the past 2 years settling over me. "Yes, you should have," I said simply. As we stood there in the kitchen, surrounded by memories, I thought about what family really meant. It wasn't about having kids or hosting endless Sunday dinners. It wasn't about putting on a perfect front for the world. Family was about knowing what was worth preserving, about fighting for what mattered, even when the fight was difficult, even when it meant making hard decisions. I raised my glass, and with a quiet, steady voice, I said, to family and to learning what it really means. Sarah and Thomas raised their glasses uncertainly, their eyes still full of unspoken regret. As I looked around the house that was truly mine now, restored to its former glory, I knew that this was the real victory. Not the house, not the money, but the knowledge that I had earned this. That I had waited, calculated, and in the end, I had made sure that justice was done. As for Emily, I hoped she would find her way. But that was her battle to fight, not mine. The story of this house and the story of our family had been rewritten. The next chapter would be different, and this time it would be on my terms. Family wasn't about fitting a mold. It was about knowing what was worth fighting for. And I had fought for this every step of the way.